Okay, imagine if you will, I didn't take a year to get to part 2 of this tutorial. Perfect. Okay, so with that being said, let's move back to where we were. So you have your animation complete. There we go. We've got our Spider-Man dancing, doing their thing. But we need to get our video out of our stop motion program and into some kind of editing software. So I'm in Dragonframe right now. I'm gonna go up here to File, Export, and you can export a few different things. You can export a movie, an image sequence, a 3D sequence, a still image, or an X sheet for editing. I usually export image sequences because you have the most latitude in post-production with color correction with image sequences. If you're not interested in much of that, you can always just export a movie and deal with movies in your editing software. So I'm going to export an image sequence and then tell it where to go. Once you have all of your shots out of your stop motion software, in this case for me it's Dragonframe, you drag those files into your editing software and then you start putting it together. So let's jump over to my computer and we can figure the rest out over there. Okay, so I've got After Effects open. So now I've already imported my image sequences, but I'll just show you the process here. File, import, file, double click on that. There's exports, we'll export one. And then we just click on the very first frame, camera raw sequence, and click import. And then after you import, importing selected items, there. You get this pop-up, which is the camera raw pop-up, which allows you to do some basic color correction. But because it's raw, you can change things like exposure and have massive latitude. Look at how much I can change the exposure on that. So that is why I work with raw sequences. You can definitely work, if you're happy with your lighting and your coloring, you can definitely work with movies out of After Effects and you'd have smaller files to deal with. But I prefer the raw image sequences just because I can do so much more with color correction. A lot more options in post-production. So then you click OK. I've already got this imported, so I'm just going to hit cancel. Yes, dismiss. And so here's my image sequence here. So to create a new composition, I'm just going to grab this, making sure that my frame rate is what I want it, 24 frames per second. That's how I want to edit it. That's good. So I grab this guy down to here to create a new composition, and we call this composition settings. I changed the setting size to a video size because that's a still image. 6000 by 4000 is still image size and very large. 3840 by 2160 is the 4K width I use, and I'll call this Spider Dance 4 Tutorial. Everything else looks good. Frame rate, it's 32 seconds long, massive. Let's click OK, and we've got our new composition. So here we are in After Effects. After Effects is a massive program. You can do tons of stuff in here. I'm not going to get into most of it. The main thing that I think you guys are all going to want to learn if you're just getting into stop motion is rig removal. So, and that's the big one for this video. So once we've got our image sequences or our movies in here, we create a composition, and then within the composition there are a couple of ways to get rid of things, and I change my method depending on the shot. So let's just go into the first shot here, Spider Dance. Okay, there we go. So I've got our composition open here. Sorry, I use two monitors. I generally have this composition frame on a separate monitor so I can see a little better, but that makes it tricky for screen recording. So drag that down here. So when I create the new comp and change the frame size from the standard photo frame, which for my camera is 6000 by 4000 pixels, I change it to 3840 by 2160, so a 4K resolution. And then I have to bring the scale down to 64% to actually scale the frame so it fits in that 3840 by 2160 frame size. This allows me some movement. I can reframe things a little bit based on how much resolution I have to play with. So that's actually pretty good. I like that part of it too. I really like to have options in post-production. So shooting in a higher resolution and in RAW, yes, the file sizes are larger, but it allows me to change things around a little bit in post. So that's one of the things I like. So looking at this image, we have our two puppets. Then we have our rigs. So the big thing, like I said, is getting rid of the rigs. We also need to get rid of these supports I've put on these action figures. So I do that with the clone stamp. I'll just show you that quickly. So I'm just going to drag this window out of the way for a moment. So over here, let's zoom in on this. So we can use, so this is tricky to get rid of, but I did manage to do it in the finished product and not have it look too bad. You do this with the clone stamp. So to select what you're going to use to clone, you take this circle and go to another part of the frame and then hold Alt, and that little target is what you're going to clone with. So if I clone with that, then I come up here and look at that. Now I'm using another part of the frame to eliminate the rig. Now you can see this gets a little tricky because now I went from red, from down here, just copied it up there, to blue. So now I need to copy this part of Spider-Man's outfit. So I'll select right there, scroll over, there we go, and it does a pretty nice job of eliminating that. So not perfect, and obviously you can finesse it a little bit more, but that is the first step in the process for me of cleaning up my animation. Now look at that. I zoom out on a phone or whatever you're looking at this video on eventually. You're really not going to notice that little bit, and I can always get rid of that. And this bit in here is a bit more blue. So that's the first thing. The clone stamp is a very useful tool as far as cleaning up animations are concerned. Then the other bit of this, of course, is removing the rigs. Now this is where having a proper plate shot is important. So I'll just scroll to the end of my animation here. And you'll see that in these last frames, there's nothing. Here, I'll drag my composition back into the frame. So there we go. That's the final shot. This is a clean plate. So what that means is I've removed the puppets and I've removed their rigs, and this is what will be the background. So when I remove or erase the stands, what remains is that behind them. Now obviously I have to reframe those two, but that's what I'm going to use to get rid of this. So basically all you're doing is layering images on top of each other. That's pretty much all After Effects is. Just like Photoshop, it's just ability to layer different images, and in this case different videos. So with that being said, we got to get rid of these. So the two ways I go about this are, one, with masks. So I grab my pen tool, make sure the right comp is selected. Then I start where I want to remove. Now usually I like to use lines of the frame if I can, because it does tend to help hide it a little more. This one I'm not going to have much luck with that, so whoops. So let's just go for the shape. So roughly do the shape, and then I go right to the puppet and down, and I close off the mask. Now this mask has, instead of removing this, it's actually made it the only part of the shot. So what I need to do is go down to my masks here, and then right here, rather than add, we go to subtract. And that's it. I've removed it. Now, because this is an animation, it's every frame. So the problem with what I've done now is, if I scroll a few frames forward, look, my matte stays in the same place. So what you have to do, go back to where I started here, right around there, I guess, is click the stopwatch for a mask path. And so what that means is, for every frame that there's a key, I can move this around. I'm just going to change to a regular pointer now. I move the mat around, and then it moves with the animation. Whoops. So, super time-consuming process, but now my mat moves. See? And of course, you want to zoom way in to do a good job of this and get it as close as you can to your figure. So there's one frame. Now the next frame, look, I moved it too far. So that's it. Frame by frame. So just like the animation process in production, in post-production, it's the same thing. You go one frame at a time, fix these. We're still not at the point where AI can take care of this. It's probably not too far away at this point, but it's still a time-consuming and tedious process to do rig removal. So that's the one way I do it with masks. The other way, let's just delete this so I'm not taking too many resources from the computer. You can have multiple masks, as many masks as you want. Oh, and look at this. There's actually a good point. The clone stamp, because I cloned more than one frame, look, it's made a mess of the next frame. So you have to make sure when you're using the clone stamp, over here in your settings, that the duration, rather than constant, should be set to single frame, right there. For all stop motion, everything is frame by frame. It's all single frame. So that means that we'll clone that single frame, make your changes, and then the next frame you're starting over. Again, super time-consuming process. So let's go back to the masks. The other thing I do for removal of rigs is the eraser tool. So what I like to do is for the garbage, for the larger sections of the frame, so this whole unit here, I like to use a garbage mat, which I just showed you, and mask and the pen tool, and that's a good way to get rid of it that way. For the smaller, more finessed bits, like this guy in his elbow here, which will change quite a bit as his arm moves, I like to use the eraser tool. So just like the clone stamp tool, similar thing. If I hold control and the left mouse key, I can change the size. So I can make it larger and smaller. And then I zoom in here. It's a little smaller. And then I just click and drag over what I want to erase. So what you're seeing, the black, is me basically making that part of the frame transparent. So now if I were to put something behind it, that's where it lands. Okay, so now that I've shown you the basics, I just want to show you what I did in the finished animation. So you can see here on this frame, I'll zoom in a little bit. Now you can see my computer is chugging along. I have a fairly powerful gaming computer, and it's still having a hard time. I'm set at half resolution here, and this is 50% of the frame, and it is taking a lot of resources of the computer. So if you want to give your computer a break, you can go down to a third or even a quarter resolution. I just want you guys to be able to see this, so that's why I'm going to stay in half. And I do prefer to have a higher resolution if I can get away with it, just because you can see minor errors you might not be able to pick up if the resolution's lower. So you can see I've got two masks, one around each character, and then I have other masks around different parts of the frame. So you can see how many layers of this composition there are just to make this thing happen. So let me just turn off a couple of the layers so you can see how in-depth this was. Let's turn off this layer. This is the top layer with our characters. Turn that off. Look, there they go. So that's them disappeared, and there's a plate behind them. There you go. And there's a big chunk of the background. So you see I had to put the background together with a couple different plates to actually make it all happen. I did some tracking. This is a dark magenta solid, so I used a solid for the floor where I couldn't make that work. So quite in depth. And if you zoom in on each of my characters, you can notice that I got rid of those parts of the rig, the little metal waistbands that were holding them up and attaching them to the rig. There, I did the same with the clone stamp over here, and those are all single frame animations, so I'll just go one frame forward. See? And then everything moves together. Everything moves together. So then, this isn't even the last part of the process. I then add motion blur down the road, but that's in the next composition once the first composition is finished. So I'll just scroll a little more so you can see the masks moving along. See how tight the masks are I did. They're very close to the figures. So most of the... Oh, there was something strange there. Look, there's something there that I missed. I finished this video long ago, so I'm not going to finish it. I'm not going to make any changes to it now. Anyways, that's it. So a lot of frame by frame removal of rigs. You have to make sure to have a good plate to get it all edited properly, and you have to pack your patience. I would sit and drink gallons of coffee and edit for hours on end. I often do these edits in the morning or late at night when I'm tired, because they're sort of brainless tasks, but they just take a lot of time. It's tons of labor. So hopefully this gives you a new appreciation for the effort required to make a good stop motion. One other bit of advice before I end the recording. I like to, on my masks, go down here and I'll show you the settings. Two things. When I'm editing, I actually like to set them to none. So the mask is actually doing nothing, but you can see the mask on the frame and follow along as it moves with your character. It just tends to be easier to make the corrections you need to make if you can see the entire frame. So that's one thing. While you're in the editing process, set it to none. The other thing is soft edges help you. And to make a soft edge on a mask, you use this feather tool. Look, I have the mask feather for this mask number 1, which I believe is the one on Miles Morales here, to 10 pixels. So it's not a massive amount, but it softens the edge of the frame up so that it transitions to the frame on the outside of it a little better. So, and same with the clone stamp tool. I use a soft brush. Anyway, so those are a couple little helpful tips, but that should at least get you started on your rig removal in After Effects. And so that's pretty much it. Like I said, there are tons of other things you can do in Adobe After Effects and other compositing programs, but for the sake of simplicity, I just wanted to show how to remove rigs, because that's really the big question I get on my stop motion videos is, where did the stands go that hold the action figures? So hopefully this has helped a little bit. I know there's a lot more to learn. I'll probably go into some more in-depth tutorials on each step of the process, but this is a real broad overview of how I do stop motion. From Adobe After Effects, obviously I export these compositions to videos, drag them into Premiere Pro, and put together the full video there. At that point, you're just video editing, so hopefully you know how to do that. Okay, thanks for stopping into the Brick Garage. More tutorials and stop motions on the way. I've got quite a few things I'm working on at the moment, so stay tuned. There's a lot of videos that are about to hit the airwaves. All right, later.